Formerly religious Redditors, what event happened to make you abandon your faith? It wasn't any event. It was just thinking about it more and more as I grew older and my doubt built until I realized I just couldn't believe in it anymore. Same. It was as natural as just gradually not believing in Santa Claus anymore. I think I thought that all adults gave up a belief in God. Jesus. I was wrong. LOL. 10-year-old brother passed away in a bad car accident. Gas tanker truck ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of my truck. I was 16. Pastor, youth pastor, and elders of the church wanted to counsel me through the whole ordeal. They basically just said that God was punishing my family for me being gay. I sat through everything with a blank face until I turned 18 and then left. I basically only speak to my mother now. I'm gay and I can't even imagine someone saying that to me. And for all that they say about God being good, yet he likes to punish, yet he doesn't solve wars, yet he doesn't help the poor. I am sorry about your brother, and good job on being strong and leaving. It began around 18 or 19 years old. I went to a religious college and was surrounded by people who were very devout Christians. I vowed to myself in my freshman year that I was going to make a solid effort to strengthen my faith by critically examining all of my doubts. Fast forward about 3 years later to the end of my junior year, I eventually realized there was nothing valid about my religion or any other. It was a heck of a lot more complicated process than I've described here, but there was a period of probably 6 months or so at the tail end of my deconversion where I was basically in limbo, not really sure what I was. I couldn't point to a day, let alone a month of where I no longer considered myself a Christian. Just like I was gradually indoctrinated into religion over the course of years, I gradually undid the knots of that indoctrination over a similar time frame in early adulthood. I didn't have any moment where I saw things clearly. It was a gradual gradient, nor was it emotionally motivated. No tragedy, no rebellion, no personal motivation, just the result of multiple years of being introspective and a skeptic. I transferred into a public school system for the first time at the age of 15. In my biology class we read about artificial natural selection and my head freaking exploded. That's funny because my science teacher in 7th grade refused to teach us about evolution. She said we could go read the chapter ourselves but she just wouldn't. That piqued my curiosity and is ultimately what brought me to believe in evolution, then eventually atheism. For a long time I believed in a divinely initiated evolution. Sandy Hook school shooting. I was passionately Christian up to that point. After the shooting, couldn't shake the feeling I was worshipping a god that let children die in such an awful way. I sought counseling from other Christians and instead received judgment and a lot of scolding, which didn't help. I think the thing that really did it was when I was in the school bathroom a few years back and some girls started talking about God. One asked me if I was Christian and I thought for a moment and replied, kind of. She replied by telling me you either are or you aren't. Obviously, you aren't. It was in a very snippety, judgmental tone. What I needed then more than anything was community and support, and I was continually met with rejection. It caused me to realize that while some people are truly faithful and kind, I still have a few deeply religious and accepting friends. A lot of people in my small town were just using it as an excuse to judge others while feeling good about themselves. I distinctly remember the last time I went to my hometown church's Sunday services. Pastor, who is my own grandfather, began preaching about how homosexuals were as bad as murderers and could be cured. Around the same time, I was realizing I was bisexual. I never went back for regular service after that. Guess I'll add my own personal anecdote. I held on to belief and tried to justify many definite, often conflicting teachings for about a decade. Probably my first big WTF was when I got sent to the principal's office at my religious elementary middle school. This was shortly after my dad took his own life. Principal sits me down and says, I know what you've been going through and understand why you've been acting out. Okay, good so far. Then proceeds to follow it with, I wish I could tell you he was in a better place, but the Bible is quite clear what happens to people who commit suicide. One of the biggest WTF moments of my childhood. Next biggest test was when I finally went to public school in high school and was exposed to a wider variety of people from all kinds of walks of life. To my surprise, gay people weren't this sinister evil I had been led to believe, and it was all downhill for my faith from there. I realized I could be a good person, in fact a better person, if I was good just because it was the right thing to do rather than trying to get another point on some cosmic scoreboard. In addition to that, I got tired of people just praying for crap to go well and feeling like they already helped. You didn't do crap. You just freaking recited a couple sentences in your own mind. Get off your butt and go physically do something for whoever's in need. Said this in another thread. Became disillusioned with the Catholic Church. Realized how much of a cultist approach they had. Then one day I heard this line. I used to laugh at other religions for the crazy crap they believed in. Like Scientology believing in a mothership that will rescue them. Yet I believe a man fit 2 of every animal into a boat. A snake spoke to a woman. And it rained frogs. Once that sinked in, I realized I was a hypocrite. I'm not a devout Catholic anymore, but I still believe in God. Just not all the BS the church brings with it. Hey man, and I think that's okay. Believing in something. It's when you get a group of people together who tell you how to live then ask for money is when this can get kinda crazy, I think. I've abandoned my religion, but I haven't completely discounted the possibility that God exists. I went to church all through primary school, did high school youth group, and all that jazz. I made friends there, had a good time, and all that. I went to a fairly large public university in the South, and I still prayed and was looking to join a church on campus. All I had ever known was a fairly progressive interpretation of Christianity. While the area surrounding the school was pretty progressive, the people who came to the school were a little more diverse in their views, to say the least. There were a lot of rural folks who were deeply religious, and that really came to light when there was an initiative to build an LGBT center on campus. This was not a new building, mind you, but a small office in an existing building where you could get information and support if you were experiencing bullying, or if you were trying to come out, or if you were just trying to be supportive to a friend who was LGBT. The Christians came out in full force against it. It's wrong. It's unnatural. It's gross. You're going to heck. Something Leviticus. We are in a conservative state. It's a conservative school. I shouldn't have to pay the extra 5 cents on my student fees. After that episode had sort of simmered down, I was pretty much done. Love the sinner, hate the sin, but also ostracize the sinner as much as possible and tell them they're awful and work towards making their lives worse. But still love them. TM. Reading the whole Bible, twice. The first time made me uncertain, but after I got to Sodom the second time I was done. If the Judeo-Christian God exists, then he is an absolute monster. I was literally forced to be Jewish. I never believed in anything religious. Around 6 years ago we found out that my mother was adopted, so she was technically not Jewish. So me too. Holy frick, you won't believe how quick I wrote that paper for the local Jewish community. I was raised Catholic as a kid and believed very strongly in the church's teachings. My parents both came from Catholic families, and the idea of not being Catholic never even entered my mind. Couldn't even conceive of the idea. My dad's sister was the most devoutly Catholic of all my family members, and she raised her children accordingly. Her son was the same age as me. We were born 4 months apart to the day, and he was an altar boy in the same church my dad and his brothers were altar boys in. One day, freshman year of high school, my cousin came home from school, turned on the TV, fell asleep on the couch, and never woke up. His 12-year-old brother found him dead in the living room. It was like the cornerstone of a building being yanked out, and the whole structure begins to crumble. The event made me angry, but out of that anger came questions. Why would God let that happen? Why would he cause so many people who loved him so much pain? Why would he keep all of this a mystery? And what about the millions of people all over the world who feel pain like this every single day? As I got older and continued to ask those questions well into adulthood, I started to realize that the only answer to these questions that I could accept was that God didn't do any of it, because God didn't exist, at least not the God I'd been brought up to believe in. It's a central issue with Christianity. Why the frick does God do so much crap in the Bible then nothing nowadays? Church camp. Everyone crying. and speaking in tongues asking God to forgive their sins. Meanwhile looking at me like I'm crazy for not crying because I felt I had done nothing to warrant it. It felt like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Then when I returned home my sister picked me up and System of a Down was playing on the radio. Now keep in mind I love System and had every album they had. I turned to her and said, "Can you please turn this music off? It doesn't represent what God wants for me in my life." She immediately slammed on the brakes and yelled, "What? Are you kidding me? This is a joke, right? I want my brother back please." And right then I snapped out of it. Realized I had been brainwashed to hate my favorite music. The words that came out of my mouth didn't feel like my own. I apologized to her and told her thank you. I started to question the church and my role in it. People attempted to explain that I had strayed off the path, but it never felt right to me. The whole thing felt like a show. The people felt like a facsimile of what people should be like. It all felt wrong. So I trusted my heart and did what made me happy. After much soul searching and reading and understanding of different cultures, I am finally at peace with my role in the world. I didn't abandon my faith. I put it where it belongs, in me. I haven't left my faith. I actually find it integral to who I am. That being said, walking around college campus and having people shout "you're going to heck" just for walking past them and being at college made it really hard to go to church. I've also become subtly aware just how manipulative some people are with my religion. I don't want to be like them. Every now and then I will go to church, but I'm very hesitant of the people talking and professing to be doing so much good in the world. I find nothing wrong with people who believe. It's the people who scream crap like that and try to dictate other people's lives that irk me. As near as I can tell, I never really had any faith in the first place. Give me a moment to explain. I was raised Catholic, and for much of my childhood, I regarded the standard Christian dogma as being just another fact of life, as set in stone and unassailable as gravity. Then, as I grew older and started to expand my worldview a bit, I realized that much of what I had taken for granted was at odds with what other people believed, and it occurred to me that religion as a whole was just a little bit silly. There wasn't a specific moment which prompted that conclusion, and for some time after years, in fact, I felt like I was trying entirely too hard to disbelieve things. At the same time, though, I became aware of another mental sensation that I hadn't been entirely cognizant of before. Back when I was about 5 years old, and this is relevant, I promise, I would get a bit carried with my games of make-believe. For example, I spent several weeks insisting to my parents that I was an alien who had taken up residence in their son's body, all the while claiming that I'd be headed back to my home planet before too much longer. To their credit, my mother and father played along with the fantasy, no doubt thinking that I'd get bored of it soon enough. But instead of that happening, I actually had something of a breakdown one evening, during which I confessed through sobs that I wasn't an extraterrestrial interloper, and that I didn't want to pretend anymore. That moment left me feeling ashamed, but it was also an enormous relief. I felt exactly the same way when I started to leave religion behind. I've believed other things over the course of my life that some part of my mind recognized as being incorrect, and in each instance, there has always been the sensation of, well, effort, I suppose, which has gone away as soon as I've dismissed the delusions in question. I don't think I'm unique in having that internal fact checker, either, and for that reason, I'm suspicious that faith is either ignorance of the sort from which I suffered as a child, or an ongoing attempt at self-deception. It's certainly possible that other people experience a kind of all-encompassing trust in the supernatural which supersedes that insistent voice, and I've heard that insistent voice being referred to as the devil on more occasions than I can count. But as near as I can tell from my own experience, faith doesn't actually exist. As such, I never really lost my faith, because I never really had any to lose. TLDR. Faith seems like it's a game of make-believe that has gotten a little bit out of hand. A pastor from a mega church preached at our church. He basically said that God wanted him to be a millionaire and then spent 90 minutes talking about the importance of tithing to faith. I sat there for at least 60 minutes with my head in my hands. Everyone around me thought I was super touched by his message. Good old prosperity gospel. Never mind the fact that he claims to follow a homeless man who advocated giving all you have to the poor. I was raised Catholic. Then I learned about it in RS at school. After my GCSEs I gave up Christianity, but still believed in a God, if not necessarily the Judeo-Christian God. Then I studied philosophy of religion, and now I'd say that I'd like to believe in a God, but without some form of empirical evidence I can't. And I know the arguments for the design of the IETC, but the classic counter-arguments are more convincing to me. The strongest argument that I have is the God of the gaps. The lack of knowledge led people to believe in a God, but the more we learn the less we need one. I thought for a moment that you learned about Catholicism in RuneScape. Anyway, I hope you're doing well in general. General disillusionment. I started noticing that very few people in the church, as well as the community, actually believed in what they preached and used their religion to support their own biases and to try to get away with being a terrible human being. A man can beat his wife or defraud others and get away with the consequences by seeking forgiveness and pretend it's all okay, only for them to do it again and again. People couldn't really answer my questions, and all the answers I got were just things to get me to stop thinking about them. The straw that broke the camel's back was me accepting that I was gay and that there wasn't anything wrong with me. For years I prayed and cried for God to take this demon away from me. Why was I still attracted to guys? I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be in love with my best friend. I didn't ask for this. When I accepted it, my faith tumbled like dominoes. If there's nothing wrong with me, then the infallible word of God, the Bible, is actually fallible. And if that's fallible, then maybe the Christian God is wrong. Maybe he doesn't even exist. I wouldn't call myself an atheist, but at the very least I don't believe that the Christian God is real. Nothing in particular. I just thought really hard about what the word God meant, and drew a blank. I was told as a child that God isn't something we can ever understand fully, therefore why try? How about you just be a good person and say frick you to people who tell you otherwise? When I realized I was lesbian but yet had grown up going to church where I heard it preached over and over again that it was wrong, I will never forget the day my father signed a petition against same-sex marriage that they were passing around the congregation during a sermon. My mother refused to sign and they got into a massive, few-day-long fight about it. I was 12 at the time and had not realized I was gay, but my mother just refused to based on principle. She tried to hide it from my younger sister and I, but I understood what was going on. When I was about 17 and really struggling with my sexuality, I remember thinking, no, I can't be gay. There is no way that I could be that, and lucky. Fast forward a couple years, and I found a girl I fell in love with. It was the purest, deepest, most genuine love. I remember thinking that if God could condemn that, then that is not a God I want to know or follow. I did not choose this, so why would he love me so much but create me in an image he hated? Nothing added up. I was far happier without church, Christians, and archaic beliefs in my life. My parents also divorced that year because my dad had been seeing other women on the side, and my mother was not Christ-like enough. The hypocrisy still makes my skin crawl. My parents started getting the pastor to condemn living with your significant other whenever I would attend. It's not really a religion when it's being used as a tool to attempt to control your life and make you feel like crap. I was really little, maybe 4th grade, while at Wednesday Bible Club, the teacher told us that no animals go to heaven. I cried and decided that if there was a God, they couldn't possibly be so cruel as to keep my dog from me in my final reward. Oh, that reminds me of the massive existential crisis I had once I realized that was a thing. It snowballed to a point where I realized that humans aren't special, so there's most likely not an afterlife out there. I mostly just got comfortable with the idea that I don't know there is a God, but that there may be. In addition, I feel like if there is a God in the traditional sense as suggested in most faiths, said entity is likely to see I do my best to live a good life regardless of the motivation of eternal salvation, which in essence I think might even make a good person who isn't of faith a better or more pious person than one behaving well purely in hopes of a reward in the afterlife. If God is all-knowing, he surely knows one's motivations. I call this the don't be a dong religion. My religious family, who refused to accept I do not believe anymore, thinks it was the sexual abuse I experienced by religious leader and I'm just angry at God. But I was still very devout for almost a decade after that ended. That isn't why. It's the people who practice Christianity who pushed me out to begin with. That was the first step away. I was struggling with anxiety and depression and PTSD, holding on to my faith desperately, seeking God. But every church I went to acted like I was a leper. I wasn't fake happy enough for them. I said no to attending their social events. Belief wasn't enough. I had to play the part. I couldn't. So, they refused to welcome me and some even told me not to attend their church. This happened 5-6 times at different churches. I became frustrated. Then, for the first time ever, was able to study religion on my own, without the cloud of the indoctrination of my parents or a pastor's sermon each week to influence me or sway me. Just me and my mind. And I realized how little sense it all made. I've no issue with believers. I will even take my kids to church to learn more, if they wish. I refuse to force my kids to be a mini version of me. I'm not angry at God or his followers. But after studying it all, there's no way I could ever believe in it all again. It just makes no sense. Just like Scientology or any other group people say have odd beliefs, they all have odd fantastical mindsets. I don't have enough fear or insecurity in life to need religion anymore. I don't mean that as a bash either. I just know that is why I personally clung to organized religion for so long. I'm much happier and at peace inside without it in my life. It wasn't an event so much as a process. I was a typical lapsed Catholic who tried to think about religion as little as possible but always fervently insisted on my faith out of fear guilt. Then I had a stint of unemployment with too much time on my hands and I got to thinking about the church's stance on my sexuality. Not straight. The more time I had to actually think about it, the more I became convinced that it was unfair that something over which I had no control could be held against me the way that it was. I stopped being willfully ignorant and began to actually seek out and take in theological debates and arguments, initially with the goal of reinforcing my faith and finding some sense of closure between it and my sexuality. It turned out that the more time I spent critically examining my faith, the weaker its hold over me became. Then my father renounced his faith and it all came crashing down. Funny thing is, it turned out that basically everyone on both sides of the family wound up abandoning ship as well. It turned out that everyone had had the same doubts or suspicions all along but hadn't said anything in the interest of keeping the peace. So the whole family had become a bunch of closet atheists who kept quiet for fear of causing offense. We're better now. But seriously, what a waste of time all that nonsense was. Empathy. I was very religious for years. Then I started thinking every religious person is absolutely convinced their way is true. How do I know that my way is the real way and they're all wrong? So I read up on the proofs, evidence, signs, etc. given by my religious leaders, but they all didn't work or had holes. Then, out of curiosity, I went looking at what the academic community had to say about the origins of the Bible. Their theories and evidence were much more convincing. I still believe in a God, but as far as I'm concerned, what he wants from us, if anything, is a mystery. These days I just try to be good to people and lead life with integrity. I'd always wondered why I never felt what everyone else was feeling. People in church would cry, become emotional, etc. And I would just be baffled at that. After drifting from Catholicism to doubt over how much doubt I had, a friend clarified everything. I asked a Christian friend, "How do you know you believe in God?" And he said, "You know how you believe in air or gravity?" That showed me that, according to that standard, I was just operating on the assumption that I was a believer. Honestly, I never believed any of it. My dad was a hardcore atheist, but my mom tried to make sure she involved us with religious stuff. But we were practical kids. We knew Santa Claus wasn't real. Why would Jesus be? Nonetheless, I sat through all the crap my mom put us through, sitting through overly intense Protestant masses where you are supposed to hold up your hands while someone sings. It was ridiculous and I hated it. I played along and tried to believe it, but I never did. Later in life, I dated a Catholic girl for a number of years. I went to church with her. As far as church goes, Catholic Mass is more my speed. At the very least, It was somewhat meditative, with the relative silence and the incense. But I never believed any of that, either. And watching her struggle to deal with the weird Catholic rules was a pain. We fooled around. Better make sure she goes to confession or she can't get communion. Ugh. But, more than anything, the worst thing about religion is the people. So much judgment and hatred. I remember my Catholic GF getting lectured by one of the Catholic moms because she wore a knee-length skirt to church one day. Thankfully, I wasn't there, or I'd have told her that if she can't control her children when they see a woman's knees, then she's a crappy parent. It wasn't really any event. I never cared much for doing anything religious, Jewish, growing up. Then after college I just asked myself why I am still eating only kosher, keeping Shabbos, and the only answer I could come up with was that it's just how my parents raised me, and that wasn't a good enough answer. When for the first time I've been beaten nearly unconscious by a kid, and seen him in the church day after, all holy and on his knees, singing and praising the God, he beating me up day after, I mentioned that, at the church, to my dad. He beating me up for mentioning the mass. That opened my eyes. It's nothing but a scam. It's a trick to make people think they are good. This is to cover up how bad people are. I decided to frick this crap, and then I decided I will be my own moral compass. Nothing will stop me, and the justice is only a point of view. Since then, I've become much better human. I am happy, and I finally started to understand other people and what guides their lives. And couple years later I've beaten up that kid within an inch of his life. He haven't harmed a fly since then, and became good citizen. This was all before I learned 4 of 6 priests in my local church were banging church service boys right and left. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.